Alright, here we are. We're on worksheet number 3, which has to do with a monochromatic color scheme. So it's now that we start using black and white in our mixtures. So notice that it tells you a monochromatic color scheme is one that includes one hue plus tints, tones, and shades of that hue. So on the color wheel, it's just one of those hues. So in order to complete this, there's quite a few things going on. I want you to pay attention to these targets because they tell you start here, start here. But the first thing is first, number 1, choose a secondary or intermediate color with the name and write the name of the hue on the line below. So that means you can't just use pure red, pure blue, or pure yellow. You have to make a mixed color. So I chose to mix blue and red together. And because I have way more blue than I have red, I'm going to be having a blue-violet. And remember when I write that intermediate or tertiary color that I'm going to write the primary color first. So there we go. I chose one. Blue-violet. I'm going to paint it in that box that says the hue. So that's the pure hue. There's not white or black mixed into it. So that's the first thing that you do. Now, if you don't already, you're going to get black and white on your foil or your palette, whatever you're using to mix. You don't need a lot of black, you do need a lot of white. So notice I have about, a little bit more than a quarter amount of the white than I have black. Mix and paint 5 shades and 5 tints of the color you choose. Or you chose. Make sure you can see a difference between each of the values. So here's what I would recommend, is that instead of making 5 separate tints and not knowing what is lighter or what is darker, is that I take white and I add just a teeny tiny bit of my color. So here it is. And I'm going to paint that in the first box. Then I add more of just my color into there, then I know it's going to be darker, and then I paint the next box and the next one and the next one. So here's the first tint. I've mixed it up, and look how it says start here with white, and that just means a pile of white, and I add a very little of the hue. So I paint that in there. Make sure that you are very neat. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush so I can get into all the edges and corners, and again, like we did on the other worksheets, I'm going to turn my paper so that I know I have the most control that way. Usually when we're mixing with white and black, we don't have to do 2 layers, so just make sure that is even before you move on. So there it is. So next thing, I'm going to add a little bit more of that hue. So I'm taking this hue, there it is. I'm adding it to that same pile so I know it's going to be darker. And then I paint the next box. And I keep doing that until I get all the way to the top. So each one of these should be slightly darker than the one before. If it's not, then I should add more hue. I'm looking at that, I really can't see a visible difference. So I'm going to add more of that hue before I move on. Notice I make sure it's all mixed on my foil before I paint. There we go. Alright, then I'm going to add more, and you can see how this is going, and more and more and more. So those are all the tints. We started here with white. Alright, the shades, we're going to work opposite. We're going to start with just the color, and we're going to add more and more black. Now this is already a dark value, a dark hue, so it's going to be hard to see. But when you add a little bit more black each time, it should get darker and darker and darker. So look at this target. It says start here with the hue only and add a very little bit of black. So here is my hue only. I'm going to bring it over here, adding a little bit of black. I should be able to see a difference. And I'm going to go ahead and paint that first box in. If you didn't notice, when I switched from white to black, I made sure I rinsed out my brush and I dried it. So that is my first shade. It is slightly darker than just the hue alone. So now I'm going to add a little bit more black to the same pile. I know it's going to be a little darker, and I paint the next box. If you have a light color for your hue, this side is going to be more difficult because it's going to get muddy really fast, and you're not going to like what you see. But don't worry, just follow directions, adding a little bit more black till I get down to the bottom. So that is the third worksheet. Transitions are working with these tints and shades. So the transition, it says pre-mix at least 3 tints. Paint a gradually fading transition from white to tints to hue.